यूपीएससी पहली बार में निकाल लिया, क्लैट पहली बार में निकाल लिया था, एलिट में ऑल इंडिया रैंक 6. व्हाट वर द स्ट्रैटेजीज व्हिच वर्क फॉर यू? सुबह उठना बेटर है या रात में जगना बेटर है? कितना टाइम रिवीजन को देना चाहिए? कितना फ्रीक्वेंटली ब्रेक्स लेना चाहिए?
You make some mistakes early on. You're learning the process, and something I said about my own journey was that to act is to err.
How was a typical first year like at NLU Delhi? How was a typical third year like and fifth year like? I think maximum लोगों के लिए एक ऐसा एग्जामिनेशन जिसका एप्लीकेशन 10 लाख स्टूडेंट्स पढ़ते हैं, 5 लाख स्टूडेंट्स प्रीलिम्स देते हैं. पर स्ट्रीम कितना मैटर करता है फर्स्टली फॉर क्लैट एंड लेटर ऑन फॉर यूपीएससी? What's a typical day in the life of a UPSC aspirant? क्या क्या पढ़ना पड़ता है, कैसे पढ़ना पड़ता है? How was your interview like?
I think it's important to be prepared for anything because anything can happen. So if I were to give a few anecdotes, I like music very much, but the chairperson just had immense knowledge. So we were discussing Ravi Shankar's concerts, Pandit Ravi Shankar's concerts, and the Woodstock festival, and I was blown away by how cool this person was. The other thing is that we had this very random discussion on life after death and whether death is meaningful. So the other interesting thing that happened in my interview was that there were a few questions from IP law for which I have a gold medal and I couldn't answer that.
So today on the podcast we have with us a typical Sharma ji ka beta, Ishaan Bhatnagar, who is an ex-elitian. He was All India rank 6 in AILET 2018, All India rank 45 from what I remember in CLAT 2018, and is also All India rank 276 in the UPSC examination which was held last year. And after clearing both CLAT and AILET, he eventually went to NLU Delhi where he spent fantastic 5 years. So welcome to the podcast, Ishan.
Hi, sir. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. So let's start with maybe a brief description of yourself. अभी तक की जर्नी बचपन से लेके कैसी रही है? If you can just summarize it for all the viewers out there.
Sure, sir. I was born in Lucknow, brought up in Bhopal. I went to Campion School, Bhopal, वहाँ से DPS. And 11th, 12th में I took PCM. Initially, I wanted to do IIT JEE. Not because I knew what it was, but because that was what all the smart people did at the time. By the end of 11th, I realized that was not something for me, and I wanted to get into law, like my cousin, and I came to LE. And that was it was a really big shift because I found myself preparing very hard. I found myself very consistent, got through CLAT and AILET, and went to National Law University, Delhi. That was a completely different experience because you're exposed to so many new ideas, so much new information, so many new activities, went for a few competitions abroad, interned with the UNDP, the United Nations Volunteers, couple of litigators and corporate firms, and had a really rich and diverse experience, at the end of which I realized that I would want to do something that had something more to do with public service, a public facing job where I'd be in the small towns and villages of India and solve problems there. So I decided that I wanted to give the civil services exam. This decision was towards the end of 4th year, somewhere in the second semester of 4th year. Appeared for it in 2023. That was my first attempt. I've got the rank 276, which will likely get me the income tax service.
Got it. Starting with your CLAT and AILET journey, Ishan. I think you wrote CLAT and AILET both in 2018. You prepared for a year and a half or so. Yeah, I think 1.5 साल का तैयारी था. How was that journey like? क्या ups and downs थे? So I understand कि उस time पे CLAT का pattern was slightly different from what it is in 2024. So how was the journey like? और क्या क्या takeaways वहाँ के थे? और उस journey में क्या क्या चीज़ें थी which helped you even later on in your UPSC prep, in your law school life, etc. etc.
Yes, sir. I started towards the end of class 11th or maybe the beginning of class 12th. I think uski summer vacation ke baad I got really serious. And I started out with a sense of great regret and a great sense of great despair because IIT my whole journey had not been very successful. It hadn't been to my liking. And for the first time, I was up against a wall that I couldn't climb. And that's when I realized that you have to be super motivated and you have to really know what you're doing because it can't just be कि हाँ मैं ये कर लूँगा वो हो जाएगा. Things are really hard. So 12th May, I came to Legal Edge, I came to you, and I told you about how my IIT journey had been. And you urged me to start afresh. So that's what I did. And I think there were a couple of challenges off the cuff. One was that I only had a year. The other thing was that one looked at droppers who had a lot more time than any fresher. And something that Karan sir said was that जिसकी जिद ज़्यादा होती है वो आगे बढ़ जाता है as opposed to जिसके पास time ज़्यादा होता है. So I think that journey was all about optimization, prioritizing, making sure that I do the syllabus multiple times, learning from coaching, but also making sure that मैं parallelly जल्दी syllabus complete कर रहा हूँ. And I gave every mock as if that was CLAT, that was AILET. And 2-3 days I'd just very intensely study for that mock and try and give that. And there were lots of ups and downs, lots of difficult scores, lots of issues at school, attendance issues, all sorts of issues. But I think just persisting with it, giving time, speaking to mentors and getting clarifications and really doggedly pursuing my objectives. I think that was the big takeaway and that helped.
Got it. And I think looking at your background, बहुत सारे students को ये लग सकता है that you have and you had everything going in favor of you. UPSC पहली बार में निकाल लिया, CLAT पहली बार में निकाल लिया था, AILET में All India Rank 6. But from what I remember, even during your CLAT days, I remember having a lot of conversations with you, your parents, जहाँ पे स्कोर शायद जितने आने चाहिए थे उतने नहीं आ रहे थे, रैंक जिस स्पीड से इम्प्रूव होनी चाहिए थी नहीं हो रही थी. तो A, क्या वैसा होता था? B, जब वैसा होता था तो what were the strategies that you used to bounce back? And same with your UPSC journey also, कि जिस टाइम पे परफॉर्मेंस वैसा नहीं आ रहा है जैसा सोच रहे हैं, तो what did you do to bounce back and eventually get the kind of ranks that you got in both CLAT and UPSC?
Sir, I'm sure ऐसा बहुत बार हुआ है. And I think what I've realized over time is जो हमको एक jump दिखता है that somebody's done really well, that's the accumulation of a lot of failures. On a daily basis, something's going wrong and then you're trying to fix it. So this happened all the time. CLAT में GK was really bad and I would get really, really bad scores. उससे कभी performance भी dip कर जाता था. In that pattern, I think 50 marks were for GK. So that was a big issue. And I think, sir, one strategy was to come to you. I think those conversations were helpful. I think having a mentor and having someone, I think when we are younger, we need someone else to help us process things and reframe things. I think as I get older, I do it for myself now. But
taking a stock of all the progress that one has done, मैं कहाँ तक पहुँचा हूँ, कितनी चीज़ें already workout कर रही हैं. And काफ़ी बार ऐसा होता है that we are a very short way off from what we want to achieve. It just seems very far because sometimes that small improvement that I'm yet to make could have made a huge difference in that mock or maybe in whatever process I am. To give a very concrete example, I've been a horrible prelims taker. Last year also I had 3 marks more than the cutoff. This time I don't know if I'm clearing the cutoff. And how I interpret that is that this is the game I've chosen to play. And this game, everything is a package. A firm job is a package. Law school is a package. You take the whole package, you buy into the experience. And then there will be uncertainty, there will be downsides to that package. And you have to be willing to accept that. And we take it with equanimity because it's only when you accept the downside do you get to play the game. And that's the only time you get to win. So that would be.
So everything is a package, which means package के साथ में उसके successes, उसकी uncertainties, उसके failures, उसके loss, उसका ups and downs सब कुछ साथ में ही आता है. And another important thing is if you've chosen to play that game, उस game के जितने ups and downs है वो साथ में आने ही हैं. You can't do anything about it. Exactly. Okay, and you wrote CLAT 2018, which was in a way recently जो पूरा controversy NEET का हुआ है and UGC NET का हुआ है. CLAT 2018 maybe I remember because it was the last online CLAT, barring 2020 which was online because of COVID. So 2018 भी I remember कि ऑनलाइन क्लैट में काफ़ी कुछ स्टूडेंट्स के साथ उनके पीसी में ग्लिचेस आए थे और वो एक बार क्लिक कर रहे थे 2-3 बार आगे हो जा रहा था. डिड एनीथिंग लाइक दैट हैपन विथ यू या?
I don't remember. I do remember that I was solving a maths question and 3-4 minutes had passed when I looked at the clock again. So I always thought I zoned out while I was solving. So I can't really say for sure.
Got it. How was the law school life like NLU Delhi mein? If you can just let all the students know, how was a typical first year like at NLU Delhi? How was a typical third year like and fifth year like? So, day in the life of a first year student, third year student, and a fifth year student.
Yes, sir. And I think it really varies. So the day in the life of a first year student will be very different from the third year student and a fifth year student. When we start out our journey in law school, I think there's this huge catch up. And I think especially I had a PCM background. So for me, those kind of humanities texts that we had to read, that was a big shift. And I think just the kind of ideas, the kind of information, the kind of complexity that's there in the curriculum. The first year, especially the first semester, is all about catching up with it and going up to that level where we're able to read Amartya Sen, we're able to read these scholars and have intelligent, informed discussions about these opinions. Alongside that, I think a lot of first years, myself included, we also got into lots of extracurriculars because for a year or two, especially 11th, 12th, the way it is in most schools, you're encouraged to just study. So I did a lot of music. People do some sports. And NLU Delhi doesn't have sports facilities that equal, say, Nalsar or other places. But some people did sports, some people did music, and it was mostly this. Second year and third year, people tend to refine their interests a little bit. You're reading enough to start writing research papers. I was trying to get published. And you're doing blogs, you're doing all of that. There's also mooting. Mooting is a big thing. People start out in the first year. By the second year, they've gotten a hang of it. By the third year, they've got their best moot, whatever that might be. Third year, fourth year, they try to optimize that. There's lots of debates. DU has an excellent debating circuit that NLU Delhi gives us access to because we are technically in Delhi. And so we had that. We had lots of ADR competitions as well. And NLU Delhi has a lot of symposiums, seminars, etc. with faculties from across the world coming. So that's this time of intense intellectual exploration. By the time the fifth year comes around, people, their objectives are a lot more crystallized. So I think there's not as much exploration as deepening that which is that they want to do. So somebody who wants to be a litigator, I know some seniors would go and work with Chief Justice Chandrachud. They'd go and work with Supreme Court judges as legal interns, maybe become legal clerks. And they work with litigators, and people would go with niche law firms, boutique firms, etc. Get that experience. Some people who wanted to prepare for exams did that. And there's a lot, it's a lot more relaxed. So fifth year is the time when people really let it all out. They go around, people go on exchange, and then that's just 3 months of great exploration and great travel.
Got it. And so whenever I start any new batch, मैं first day पे student से पूछता हूँ कि law क्यों कर रहे हो और आगे क्या बनना चाहते हो. At least 80% of the students in their class 11th have already decided कि उन्हें आगे क्या बनना है. Which is very surprising for me, क्योंकि उनको आगे जो बनना है technically उसका first step ही वो 7 years down the line लेंगे. 2 years of CLAT preparation and then 5 years of the law school journey. In your case, UPSC करना है, was it decided in your class 12th itself? Or in the first year of law school, in the fourth year of law school, fifth year, या after you graduated? So UPSC के preparation का journey कब start हुआ? और उसका idea पहली बार कब आया?
So to reflect on the question a little bit, I think we're very focused on the what and not so much on the why. So I think something you asked me earlier about setbacks, I think if you have a strong enough why, you're willing to withstand the how and get to the what. So for me, I've always been a bit of a wanderer. And UPSC का essay भी था इस साल. I had a very good score in the essay. It was not all those who wander are lost. And I really stand by that because that's how my life has been. 11th, 12th में I wanted to do hardcore physics, मतलब good research in physics. Law school में I wanted to be a public interest litigator, some sort of a public facing, very pro bono kind of profile. And I was really interested in academia. I was very, very opposed to the services just on principle because my family would always push me for the services. If you remember CLAT में where I had 45, my first reference was AILET Bhopal because they just wouldn't let me go to Bangalore. Yes. So that was my background. So I was actually very opposed to it. It's only that in those 5 years of law school over time, what I realized was it's a very hard life. Being a litigator is a very, very hard life. There's a lot of challenges. and the remedies we get in quotes, I think there are some limitations to what remedies you get and the execution of those orders. Because ultimately it's likely to go to a district magistrate and so on, and then wo kya execute ho raha hai, kya follow ho raha hai. We have these excellent laws, judgments in place. So I thought it was best to be the executor, to go there and solve these problems. So fourth year ke end tak is when I decided that I wanted to pursue the civil services, and that's when I had my resolve, ekdam pakka resolve jo hota hai. It took a lot of time. I watched Swadesh a couple of times before this happened. For one full week, I was watching it on and off, and then I decided. Um, and then I had a big loss at the end of fourth year. My grandmother passed away. So fifth year was when I started preparing in earnest, but I would say that half a year had been on and off prep before that.
Got it. So you started preparing for UPSC, I think, by the end of your fourth year, and you prepared for the whole of fifth year. So how was the preparation journey like? What was a typical life, typical day? What's a typical day in the life of a UPSC aspirant? और क्या क्या पढ़ना पड़ता है, कैसे पढ़ना पड़ता है? So if you can dwell a little on that.
I think one very common thing across exams and in the life of every aspirant is that you make some mistakes early on. You're learning the process, and something I said about my own journey was that to act is to err. So every time I act, I commit some mistake, and then I learn from it and get better. And that, I think, is the spirit with which we take our mistakes and we take our learnings early on. So I think when I started with UPSC, the conventional advice is to pursue one book, to pursue one set of sources. So Lakshmikant for polity, for instance. Eco, maybe you will take up one source out of Sri Ram, Somnodals, and so on. So there's one source, and you make your book list. And then you read it very well, and one solves questions based on that. PYQs are a very big part, both of CLAT, of UPSC, everywhere, I think. And I think I made a lot of mistakes there, and I did a lot of different sources, and I took my learnings. And over time, I think what really helped was one thing, that I was still in college. So there's a lot of peace that comes with that. There's a safety net. There's a bubble. I think that stress isn't there, that, oh, I've left college. What am I doing with my life? That really helped. I had a lot of family support as well. And then helpful seniors, cousins, and so on. So, but to answer the question more directly about the day in the life of a UPSC aspirant, initially it's very haphazard. Eventually one gets to a plan. So maybe I want to spend 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, with law school, maybe a little less. And I would try and divide my day between different subjects and between different stages of the exam. So you primarily prepare for the prelims and the mains. And there's different kinds of preparation. Mains is more subjective, more answer-based. Prelims is more objective. So I would try and divide my day and allocate different time to different subjects based on my strengths. So polity, maybe less time, economics, maybe more time, and try and get multiple revisions in, along with tests and feedback.
And Ishan, what were your study strategies, study ethics? क्या-क्या तौर तरीके use करता था, which helped you in your CLAT AILET days, in your law school days, and later on in your UPSC preparation days? So, या फिर अगर मैं और डायरेक्टली पूछूँ तो कुछ टिपिकल सवाल जो स्टूडेंट्स पूछते हैं इस टाइम पे, सुबह उठना बेटर है या रात में जगना बेटर है? ए, कितना टाइम रिवीजन को देना चाहिए? बी, कितना फ्रीक्वेंटली ब्रेक्स लेना चाहिए? सी, सो कितना फ्रीक्वेंटली ब्रेक्स लेना चाहिए इन द कोर्स ऑफ अ डे, एंड कितना फ्रीक्वेंटली ब्रेक्स लेना चाहिए इन द कोर्स ऑफ द कंप्लीट प्रिपरेशन साइकिल, एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. सो CLAT के टाइम पे भी एंड देन UPSC के टाइम पे भी, what were the strategies which worked for you in context of these questions and more?
I think quite a few of them I picked up here. One thing that really works for both exams and across other exams as well, I believe, is to begin with the end in mind. So when I speak to juniors, especially people who are writing CLAT, and they'll ask me some question, and I'll ask them, have you given this year's paper? Have you sat with this paper and you know what it is? And the answer is very often no. And I think that's a bit of a mistake, because I think one must start with the end product, look at the paper, because perhaps there's a lot of things you already know, and there's things that you have no idea about. So I think the first thing to do is to look at the paper that's come, look at a couple of papers, see what one's strengths and weaknesses are, and then to have a sense of what the syllabus is. After that, it's important to try and allocate time to different topics, because what happens is that अगर हम ऐसी तैयारी शुरू कर देते हैं The first few topics we do in a lot of depth. और जैसे पीछे जाते हैं last तक is just one quick reading and then you're in the exam. So I think that allocation of time, that allocation of timelines, something that we discussed a long time ago was that मेरे plans work out नहीं करते थे. So what you said was to not have your plan work out is unfortunate, but to not have a plan at all is more unfortunate. So you start out with a plan and you start out with a very good idea of what it is that you need to do. And then there have to be lots of checks along the way. So I think mocks are a very good example. PYQs are a very good example. So ever so often you do an audit, you do a check of where am I, मैं कितना कर पा रहा हूँ, क्या छूट रहा है. And then I think mock analysis copy or something आप लोग ने बनवाई थी. Mac. So the first Mac I had. So that's a good idea. So one has to have a list of things, even for the interview stage. I had a list of topics that I had to do. I had a list of things that I had trouble answering. IR was weak for me, for instance. So I had a list of questions that I wanted to prepare and so on. So that progress tracking is really important. That's the second thing. The third thing is, I think, being consistent. Far more than anything else. Far more than being, अरे मैंने इतने सारे topics एक हफ्ते में खत्म कर लिए. And people feel that. Because boards वगैरह में that works. कि मैंने एक हफ्ते पढ़ लिया, मेरा ये हो गया, वो हो गया. Just being consistent over time, giving time every day. घर पे पढ़ाई नहीं होती थी तो मैं यहाँ पे आके लाइब्रेरी में बैठ के पढ़ता था. And college में भी I used to be in the library 12 बजे तक, जब तक लाइब्रेरी खुली होती थी. Just sitting, giving the hours, being consistent and actively studying, not just passively reading, but trying active recall and all of these methods, I think that helps.
90% of the success is just showing up. Just showing up day after day. Well, because maximum students का, and I think this is across examinations, what happens is आप day 1 पे start बहुत ज़्यादा motivation के साथ करते हो because आप start कर रहे हो. You don't have any baggage on day 1 और and maybe you do all the right things on day 1. आप previous papers शायद कुछ लोग कर भी लेते हैं, pattern अच्छे से देख भी लेते हैं और but जहाँ पर वो 2-3 mocks में score कम आता है शायद तब भी वो लगे रहते हैं. पर जब वो कंसिस्टेंटली कुछ मॉक्स तक स्कोर जब इम्प्रूव नहीं होता है वहाँ पर थोड़ा सा 2 अलग अलग टाइप के एस्पिरेंट्स 2 अलग अलग ट्रेन पकड़ लेते हैं. सो देयर आर सर्टेन काइंड ऑफ एस्पिरेंट्स जो उसके बाद भी लगे रहते हैं. दे जस्ट कीप शोइंग अप डे आफ्टर डे. दे कीप डूइंग द सेम थिंग्स एंड दे ऑल्सो इंश्योर कि जो गलतियाँ वो कर रहे हैं वो गलतियाँ कम करते हैं. बट सर्टेन एस्पिरेंट्स डू समथिंग विच इज कॉमनली नोन एज क्वाइट क्विटिंग. सो क्वाइट क्विटिंग वैसे टेक्निकली इट्स अ कॉर्पोरेट टर्म बट हम CLAT aspirants के लिए भी यूज़ करते हैं जहाँ पे दे स्टिल कम टू द क्लासेस, दे स्टिल कम फॉर मॉक्स, बट उन्होंने मन मान लिया होता है कि यार अपना तो नहीं होने वाला है. तो एंड आई थिंक दैट्स अ मिस्टेक. सो येस, अगेन 90% ऑफ द सक्सेस इज showing up daily. So got it. Another question, Ishan, which a lot of aspirants or at least the CLAT aspirants would be curious about. 11th-12th का stream कितना matter करता है firstly for CLAT and later on for UPSC? So क्या कोई stream में कोई खास advantage होता है in CLAT or in UPSC? क्या कोई stream में disadvantage होता है? So what's your take on this?
So I would say each stream has its own advantages. So humanities ka perhaps reading and being acquainted with the social sciences. That helps because UPSC में आपको NCERTs ही पढ़नी होती हैं, GK का एक रोल होता है. But then PCM also gave me a set of advantages. For one thing, and this is a bit of a stereotype, but PCM students have to study for much longer hours. It's a stereotype. It's not true.
But it's factual in nature. It is what it is.
It is what it is, especially if you're doing IIT, even if it's a bit of a failed attempt, like it was for me in the 11th class. Just sitting longer and then having that mathematical aptitude, that helps with data interpretation, that helps with CSAT and UPSC. Humanities has its own advantages. Commerce is also very useful because a large chunk of UPSC prep, even for CLAT, eco is a big thing. And if you've done commerce with maths, then you get that quantitative edge as well. I think commerce has these broader things of marketing, etc., that have a lot of bearing on how we live life. So I think, and do what we do during law school, what we do outside of it. So I think this is advice that you gave someone a long time ago, and I happened to be there, so I listened to this, which is that it has to be based on the student's competencies. क्या वो स्टूडेंट ऐसा कुछ है, स्पेशली अगर उसे CLAT देना है, तो CLAT किसी एक स्ट्रीम से डायरेक्टली लिंक्ड नहीं है. इट्स नॉट लाइक JEE और मेडिकल. तो क्या वो एक ऐसा स्ट्रीम है जो वो स्टूडेंट एंजॉय करता है? क्या वो उसके चैलेंजेस आराम से सह पाएगा? क्या वो अच्छे से प्रिपेयर कर पाएगा फॉर क्लैट अलोंगसाइड दिस? For my PCM, there were months that I wasn't there in school or where I was quite quitting in a way. And studying, I
took my legal edge material and I solved it during class. So, but I could handle the boards towards the end. I studied for a month or 2 months and did not do a lot of CLAT then. But that was because I had that aptitude for science. And I couldn't remember a lot of things. So physics में ऐसा होता था, आपको 3-4 equations याद हैं, formulae याद हैं, तो आप बाकी सब derive कर लेते हैं. So that was a big advantage. Chemistry was very hard for me because उसमें याद करना पड़ता था. So I think it has to be the students' competencies and their interests. And every stream will give some advantage.
And the grass is always green on the other side. तो बहुत बार बच्चों को humanities वालों को लगता है यार science better है, science वालों को लगता है commerce better है. But so what you're saying is even for UPSC doesn't really matter a lot. Humanities, commerce, science आपने कुछ भी 11th 12th में लिया, कोई खासा advantage या disadvantage preparation में नहीं होने वाला है. And what about law students? So do law students have an edge if they are preparing for UPSC, or is that a disadvantage as compared to other type of graduations? So what's your take on this?
Sir, I would say that, like, back to the stream answer as well, there are advantages everywhere. You have to spin it right. So for law students, I think there's a definite advantage in GS2. Because there's 4 GS papers. One is history, geography, society.
Just cutting you short. Before you give this answer completely, can you just quickly let us know कि UPSC का पूरा तीनों stages कैसे होता है? Prelims में क्या आता है, mains में क्या आता है, interview? Because I think pretty much everyone knows that it's 3 stages: prelims, mains, and interview. But how are the papers like?
For sure. So prelims is an objective paper of 100 questions plus 2 minus 0.66. And for prelims, there's no particularly defined syllabus. They have some very broad headings, but it could be anything under the sun. Typically, an average aspirant will prepare for polity, economy, science and tech, environment, current affairs, geography. So these are these broad areas that we prepare for. And there can be anything under the sun. Just say a lot of CLAT type GK, which is inherently very random. It used to be in my time. That can also come in. इस साल वो आया था, Navy admirals, सारी posts को arrange करना था, something like that. Okay. So there can be a lot of trivia, sports trivia, etc. But mostly it's these broad subjects. When you go to the main stage, it's a drastic shift because mains has a very defined syllabus, and all that you're doing when you're preparing for mains is that you're preparing for each heading of the syllabus. So economy has a couple of headings like inclusive development and so on. तो आप सिर्फ वो एक heading को address करते चलते हैं. It's a very structured exam. And mains has a couple of language qualifiers. They've got an essay paper. They've got 4 GS papers. One is history, geography, society. 2 is polity, international relations, governance, and social justice, which is very similar to society. 3 has a bunch of things like economy, science and tech, environment, etc., etc. 4 is the ethics paper. And then there's 2 optional papers, optional 1, optional 2. And for a professional course, this syllabus can be very vast. So for law, it's very vast because they try and ask you stuff that you studied through 5 years of law school. So that's how those 2 papers are. So that's the main stage. After mains, we have the interview stage. That perhaps is the most unstructured because it's really up to the panel what they want to talk about. And what this typically entails is brushing up all of one's basics. You go back all the way to what you did in school and what you did in college, and to try and have a very informed conversation, and doing lots of newspapers, lots of mocks to try and hone one's skills. So those are the 3 stages.
3 stages. Got it. I think we were answering some question.
Yeah.
What was the question?
So the question was law and what advantages it confers.
Okay.
So the advantages that law confers. So prelims ke stage mein polity is a reasonably important subject, 12 to 15 marks, and it's very consistent in terms of the weightage because with UPSC weightage changes year on year. Some subject that was very weighty one year can all but disappear the next. So polity is a subject that's very consistent. It's important for pre. It's really important for mains because GS2 has a large component of polity that comes right out of constitutional law. So it's very, very, there's a great overlap there. And governance, etc. also have some overlap with what we study in law school. Paper 4, ethics, has a lot of case studies. And I think, of course, there's this theory within ethics and so on. Some of it has some overlap with jurisprudence, which is something that law students study. But outside of that, there's also the idea of taking a factual situation, which is so easy for law students. We have the IRAC method: issue, rule, argue, application, and conclusion. So we know how to handle those case studies. I think it comes very naturally to law students. The essay can sometimes be very high yielding. For me, I had a pretty high score this year for the essay. And one reason for that was that there was a topic that had something to do with justice and charity and so on. And we've done theories of justice. So I think there it helps. Then having a very good optional, and this can be any optional, but if you're a law graduate and you've done law very well, then a lot of the interview questions can also be on law. For me, 70% questions were on law. And I could answer that because I thought very deeply about those issues. And I think that's also because NLU Delhi has this culture of debate and discussion where we've discussed the questions that are likely to come up.
Got it. How was your interview like? And another question connected to this. क्या यूपीएससी में इंटरव्यूज वैसे ही होते हैं जैसा वेब सीरीज और मूवीज में दिखाया गया है? सो 12th फेल हैड अ गुड 10-15 minutes का इंटरव्यू सीन, एंड इवन एस्पिरेंट्स द वेब सीरीज बाय टीवीएफ हैड अ गुड 15 odd minutes का इंटरव्यू सीन. सो क्या इंटरव्यू सच में वैसे ही होते हैं? एंड हाउ वाज योर इंटरव्यू लाइक? इफ यू कैन जस्ट शेयर सम एनेक्डोट्स फ्रॉम दैट.
Yes and no. I would say that there is that creative liberty, because I think with all of this exam, a lot of it is very boring. If they made a very realistic movie, that wouldn't work at all.
No one would watch it.
Nobody would watch it. I wouldn't want to watch my own journey. So there is that creative liberty, but they do try and challenge you. They do try and nudge you. They will pose difficult questions. Questions that either I don't have full knowledge of, B, questions which could be potential traps. Not in the sense that they're trying to score me down or something. It's just that how do I handle difficult questions? So if I were to give a few anecdotes, one thing that was very interesting with my panel was that I like music very much, but the chairperson just had immense knowledge. So we were discussing Ravi Shankar's concerts, Pandit Ravi Shankar's concerts, and the Woodstock festival, and I was blown away by how cool this person was and how much he knew. The other thing is that we had this very, very random discussion on life after death and whether death is meaningful. So I think it's important to be prepared for anything, because anything can happen. And the other interesting thing that happened in my interview was that there were a few questions from IP law, for which I have a gold medal, and I couldn't answer that. Because for some reason it just was wiped clean from my mind, and that is the kind of setback that one faces, that you're in the interview hall, there's still other people you've got to answer to, and you've not been able to answer a few questions. So I had to pick myself back up, have the same upbeat demeanor, try and answer them, go to the next interview with a fresh slate. So yeah.
So IP law, what Ishan is saying, is intellectual property law, which consists of, from what I remember, 6 or 7 different type of laws, which is copyright, patent, trademark, industrial applications, etc., etc. Okay, got it. So what plans now, Ishan? Now with after having cleared UPSC last year, and you said mostly you will be an IRS officer.
Yes, sir.
So what plans now?
I've given the exam again with prelims. There's some people who have a facility for people. They do really, really well. I have a friend who's scoring 130 on this paper. I'm scoring close to 85 from the answer.
अच्छा, मैंने ये सवाल इनफैक्ट मैंने पूछा भी था तुझसे when we were discussing this. So I think maximum लोगों के लिए एक ऐसा एग्जामिनेशन जिसका एप्लीकेशन 10 लाख स्टूडेंट्स भरते हैं, 5 लाख स्टूडेंट्स प्रीलिम्स देते हैं, और फाइनली you got an all India rank of 276, and you're saying that you're giving the exam again. You gave the exam again. क्या ये काफ़ी बच्चे करते हैं जिन्होंने निकाल भी लिया है UPSC, या you are an exception, या मतलब why did you think of giving the examination again?
It does seem very absurd, because this wouldn't happen anywhere else. For CLAT, you just take the college that you have. Nobody would give it again. There's 2 reasons for that. One is that it is very common. Even for people who've got an under 100 rank and who've got the IPS, it's extremely common for them to give it again. And the other thing is that there's a structural reason for that, which is that there's something called an extraordinary leave. That's a concept for the services, which is that when I join, so there'll be training at Labasna and then at the Academy for Direct Taxes. And when you join there, you have the option of filling out that extraordinary leave form. And what that does is that your seniority remains the same and you get a year's leave without pay to give the exam again. So it's inbuilt into the system. It's a very structural feature of the civil services exam. And people do it because different services have there's different roles under each service. And the IAS is the service that has the broadest field of application. So the Indian Administrative Service, they're virtually everywhere. You have them in PSUs. You're the CEO of a district municipal corporation. You're also in the tribal affairs department. So that is the broadest field. Every other service is more specialized. So people want as broad a palette to work. So I think that is why people will keep giving the exam again, not just once, but for even under 100 ranks.
Okay.
There's a second time and a third time and a fourth time and so on. So that is very common.
Got it. Reflecting on your law school life, Ishan. So मैंने भी अपने टाइम पे लॉ स्कूल में एक चीज़ देखी थी कि कुछ स्टीरियोटाइप्स बने रहते हैं. मूटिंग सभी को करना ही है. कुछ लॉ स्कूल में तो कंपलसरी भी है, बट अगर कंपलसरी नहीं भी है तो भी वो एक पीयर प्रेशर है कि अगर मूटिंग नहीं कर रहे हो तो व्हाट आर यू डूइंग विद योर लॉ स्कूल लाइफ. या टुवर्ड्स द 4th 5th ईयर कॉर्पोरेट में सबको जाना ही है. एंड बहुत सारे लोग तो जाने के बाद फिर डिसाइड करते हैं कि क्या उनको यहाँ पे रहना भी है कि नहीं रहना है, इन लॉन्ग टर्म ऑब्वियसली. सो लाइक रिफ्लेक्टिंग ऑन योर लॉ स्कूल लाइफ, व्हाट डू यू थिंक कि क्या वो स्टीरियोटाइप सही है? क्या सर्टेन थिंग्स सबको करना ही चाहिए? बिकॉज अ लॉट ऑफ इनकमिंग फर्स्ट ईयर्स आर ऑल्सो वॉचिंग दिस पॉडकास्ट who are just about to enter certain law school. So what are the do's and don'ts as per you? क्या चीज़ें करनी चाहिए, क्या चीज़ें नहीं करनी चाहिए, कैसा mindset रहना चाहिए, especially in the first year of a law student?
Sir, I think this is a real dilemma. So I have had so many first years come to me across my years at law school and ask me this exact question. And there are two things. One is that there is no set path. People take very, very different paths. And sometimes the road less traveled is the road that's better and that leads to better outcomes. You with Ellie, sir, that's not a conventional path at all, but it's done so well. So I think that is there. That is the easier thing to say. That's true, but that's the easier thing to say. It's very hard being a first year and you're seeing all of this happen and you're in that environment to make that decision. So one thing that I really benefited from was to try everything, to be a part of everything. And then through my experiences, I was able to learn about what is valuable and what isn't. At the same time, it's important to not see it as a train. कि ये train पकड़ ली या miss हो गई. There are people who will only do one moot in their 4th year and they win that moot. And that's the college's biggest achievement in 10 years. There are people who will keep doing it and then who will move off to litigation and so on. And I think the other thing that's important is that there is a bare minimum that one should do. One thing that I've told my juniors over the years is do not make a decision that forecloses options. So, for instance, in academics, it's not necessary to be batch rank 1 or 2, but it's necessary or it helps to have a reasonably good batch rank, to have a reasonably good academic profile, to take it seriously and at least in the first few years to pay attention. Now, this has two things. One is that placements should be an option in the 4th year. Even if we don't take them up, there's no necessity of taking that particular path. And like you said, lots of people decide later on that they don't want to do it. There's high attrition at law firms. But having that option open is important. Doing some extracurriculars and some co-curriculars, maybe not mooting, but debating, maybe ADR, maybe something else, that gives us good skills that might be useful vis-a-vis public speaking, vis-a-vis even as an officer if you're negotiating with other departments. So I think there's a core minimum of skills and competencies that we should all try and acquire in law school. Outside of that, what we do should be governed largely by our interests and our aspirations, and sometimes also family situation. If money is an important factor vis-a-vis family situation, then maybe you do a cop job for a few years. But that would be my take.
I think one key takeaway from what you just said is, unless there can be an exception of a family situation या कुछ कंपल्शन ही है, देयर इज अ सर्टेन रूट दैट यू नीड टू टेक. लॉ स्कूल के अंदर बहुत सारा टाइम, बहुत सारा एफर्ट स्किल्स एक्वायर करने में जाना चाहिए, बिकॉज वंस यू ग्रेजुएट, so there are certain skills that you can acquire at the ripe age of 19, 20, 21, 22 only, and once you graduate you're just expected to use those skills. And बाद में अगर आप लिटिगेशन में चले जाओगे, कॉर्पोरेट में चले जाओगे, वहाँ स्किल्स एक्वायर करने का इतना टाइम आपको कोई नहीं देने वाला है जितना बहुत अनफिल्टर्ड सा टाइम आपको लॉ स्कूल के अंदर मिलता है. एंड बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स लॉ स्कूल के अंदर के वो छोटे छोटे फेलियर्स को बहुत बड़ा मान लेते हैं, जबकि टेक्निकली देर आर ऑल स्टेपिंग स्टोन्स, एंड नो वंस गोना रिमेंबर देम फ्यू ईयर्स, तो दूर की बात है, इवन फ्यू वीक्स डाउन द लाइन. सो लॉ स्कूल में आई थिंक वो थोड़ी सी बेशर्मी इज गुड. इवन इफ यू आर नॉट अ गुड पब्लिक स्पीकर, just go out there and speak. Just raise your hand and ask the doubt, and just give the answer if you have the answer. So I think one advice to the law school students would be, जितना skills acquire कर सकते हो law school में वो करो, क्योंकि वो आगे जाके काफ़ी useful होने वाला है. Okay. So before we end, Ishan, this was a wonderful experience. Any advice for A, the CLAT aspirants, B, even though we discussed कर चुके हैं, but if you can just give an advice in a nutshell to the incoming law school students, CLAT aspirants and incoming law school students.
I think my advice to CLAT aspirants would be to firstly try and enjoy the process. Secondly, as we've discussed to no end here, look at the PYQs, look at what your pattern is. Please, if you've got a year to prepare, don't be looking at it halfway through your preparation. हम लोग सोचते हैं कि मैं पहले सीख लूँ फिर मैं करूँगा solve. And C, to try and be very consistent, to be very clear about their objectives. ये syllabus है, मुझे ये करना है, इस हफ्ते तक ये हो जाना चाहिए. उसके साथ हम टेस्टिंग करें, उसके साथ हम फीडबैक करें, and to take failures in their strides. ये लॉ स्कूल में भी होगा, ये यहाँ भी होगा, बहुत से फेलियर्स आएंगे. आपको लगता है लिस्ट देख रहे हैं और लोग देख रहे हैं मेरा ये नहीं हुआ वो नहीं हुआ. nobody cares. Everybody cares about the one rank you can get at the end. उसके बारे में भी also nobody. Once you get into law school, nobody asks me my rank. So you just have to get there. So I think that is very important for CLAT aspirants. For people who are going into the first year, I think something that you said, sir, they have to be willing to fail. To act is to err. You will step on a few toes, you will make a few mistakes, definitely make a fool of yourself, and that's perfectly fine. They should try and go there with as open a mind as possible, as open a heart as possible, very willing to learn, to make mistakes. This is not the time to be, oh, I want to be number one. So there is that drive is super important in when you are giving CLAT, because I want to have a good rank is important to getting a good NLU. Once you're there, it has to be about, I'm going to learn as much as possible and maintain and ensure that basic minimum of a good rank, of some activities, of a great friend circle. So all of that is there. And I really hope that they have an incredible time at law school. Wherever you go, make amazing friends and have lots and lots of enriching experiences.
Wonderful, Ishan. So thank you so much from my side and from the side of all the CLAT aspirants as well as the incoming law school students for coming over for this, Ishan, and doing this. So it was great having you here. All the very best for your future, and take care.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you, Ishan.
Thank you.